Welcome to Books in the Biz, the show where real-world business meets real-world results. Hosted by business strategist Dan Paulson and veteran CFO Richard Beltry, this podcast breaks down the stories, trends, and financial insights shaping today's companies. Dan brings decades of experience helping leaders simplify operations, build strong cultures, and scale with confidence. Rich adds his deep financial expertise from guiding organizations across healthcare, construction, logistics, and professional services. Together, they dig into what's really happening behind the numbers and what it means for owners, executives, and anyone trying to grow a stronger, smarter business. This is practical conversation, real talk, and tools you can use right now. Welcome to Books in the Biz.
Hello, welcome back to Books in the Biz. Rich, how are you doing today?
I am doing well, and it's actually warmer, so we're good.
We like warmer. Finally, summer is here. Kelly Murphy, welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
You bet. For those who are familiar with our podcast, Kelly was on, I believe, about a month ago, and due to the topics that she brings to the table, I think we're going to try to have you on about once a month, right?
Yes.
So we got plenty of HR topics. We know a number of our clients deal with HR issues. So here's some cheap or free advice, if you want to call it that. But I know I get brought into a number of HR issues, and some of them are well beyond my reach. So it's good to have a connection like you. So thanks again for coming on. Today, we are going to talk about a number of issues related to, I would say, how we manage our employees and where we need clarity in. And before we jumped on this podcast, we were kind of going through, there's 1,000 different things we could talk about, but we don't want a 4-hour-long podcast. It really boiled down to, there's a lot of stuff we do on email. We all do. Send emails out, respond to emails, this, that, the other thing. In an HR situation, though, that can kind of put you in a bit of a bind. And I wanted you to touch more on that. I think this is where maybe the handbook might be missing, or the email is the handbook, and that can cause all sorts of problems. So I'm just curious, Kelly, what have you seen out there? What experiences have you had as far as using email to kind of manage your HR situation?
That's a great place to start, Dan. And you're exactly right. Like, a lot of the businesses that I work with have outgrown their HR infrastructure, if they had one in the first place, which often they do not. It's kind of an informal tribal knowledge type situation where they're small. Everybody knows how to do everything, so nothing is documented. So, from an email standpoint, and again, in the beginning and when you're small, it's just easier. You fire off an email and, okay, situation taken care of, communication made. The challenge is, as you continue to grow and as time goes on, that email box gets bigger and bigger. And if these specific emails, these critical emails, such as anything to do with pay or pay increases, compensation, bonuses, changes in status, if those aren't saved in an employee file, they do tend to get lost.
So when that happens, where have you seen situations, for example, that might be putting the business at risk? That's another thing we were kind of talking about before we jumped on here is, each of these situations can put your company at risk and lead to additional costs, additional legal fees, potentially fines, fees, potentially paying an employee something you didn't think you would have to pay them. Do you have any examples of where that's taken place?
I do. I'm working with a nonprofit right now that there's two of them basically running the nonprofit. They have additional staff, but it's the two people that are in charge. And they are starting to talk about succession planning of, okay, we travel together, we go to places together. What happens if something happens to one or the both of us? This whole thing would fall apart. So yes, you have the risk from the employee side of what does that mean for them if something happens with the executive director or her number two, but also from all of the other people in the community. Since this is a nonprofit, there's a lot of donations that are going on. There's money that's been committed. There are certain other events and planning and things that impact larger group of people, where if something happens as some sort of disaster scenario or some sort of risk to the business, it not only is contained to the two people who are running the nonprofit, but suddenly becomes this compounding effect that just impacts up to hundreds of people potentially. So this could be reputational damage, I think, is the least of it. There is real financial impacts if they do not have structure in place, in these systems in place where the business can continue to run even if something happens to one or two of the people that are in leadership.
Yeah, I would say, from a financial side, if, your key leaders, especially if these were the people that started the foundation or the not-for-profit, if something happens to them and people have now made donations and they're wondering where that money's going to go, and there's no clear explanation of, how this is managed, or more or less who's going to be managing it in your case, that could lead to lawsuits. And I think we've seen, there's been some public ones out there and some pretty large public ones where, they've come after you for either getting their money back or for suing you well beyond that because you haven't delivered on what you were going to promise.
Exactly. And that's hard to come back from, if at all.
Rich, from your end, what do you see?
Well, I think from my interaction with HR, which is probably less than yours, Dan. My kind of perspective has always been that it's like the well in my house. If I don't put something in that basically takes care of it and puts a new one in and then maintains it over time, then eventually that will cost you more than if you just maintained it. So as I'm hearing you talk, I'm hearing kind of the same thing. Like, everywhere I've run into HR, it's been a problem. And the problem generally has been the owner. But sorry to anyone who watches me. But the mentality that I've run into when I run with this smaller company that we're hoping to grow, the smaller company, the founder says, HR, we don't have any of those issues. And you're just kind of shocked, like, we don't have any of those issues. Or, you hear, well, we have a handbook, and you lift it up and you dust it off. No one's looked at it. So these are the types of things. The smaller the company, the worse off I think you are. It's like, it has to be one of your first questions. Like, what is your HR? Where are your policies? What are you doing with it every month? And then what industry are they in? Because every industry adds a quirk, especially if you're dealing with healthcare and credentialing and, licensing and everything else that goes along with that. There's just so much more to think about. And I don't want to derail what you were saying about emails, because that's just across the board. That's not industry, but that's everywhere that, get that who put out an email that superseded or didn't pay any attention to the handbook, didn't pay attention to company policy as previously published. I had a company in the UK that offered an employee health insurance, and they don't have a health insurance plan. And all the other people didn't get the health insurance offer, and you're sitting there and you're like, immediately you go, we want to talk about risk. It's like you just botched anything HR and anything ERISA in one sentence of an offer letter. So and now I'm the one who's turning around saying, I got to be the bad guy and say, you got a problem. So.
Well, and you're right. Like, if there's an email that contradicts a policy or the handbook, the 6 to 8 year old handbook that may or may not be in existence. Like, which document is correct? Which one do you follow and you go with? So yeah, I mean, I see this regularly as well. Of HR is treated as this reactive thing. Oh, I'll just deal with it in the moment. This is not a big deal. I don't want to spend time or money putting these processes in place until there's a problem. And then you go to lean on your resources and they're of no help to you whatsoever. Speaking of risk, I'm working on a handbook right now. I'm updating a handbook that was last updated in 2019 for a client. And I asked him a question about, okay, we need to spell out AI. So this is still on the topic of risk. So what is okay? What is not okay for your staff to be putting into whatever platform they're using? And it was so fascinating to watch his mind work of, oh, I've never thought about this before. He's owned the business for 30 years. Was like, well, can they put in your product specs? Can they put in your markup? How do you calculate what this cost is going to be, the markup, as they're doing their proposal or whatever it may be? You need to spell out, you can do this, you cannot do this. And, I think this whole world of AI is probably another podcast in itself, but there is huge risk because we are already seeing so much information not only being shared openly and publicly, thinking there's this veil of privacy there. But it kind of goes back to the documentation of when it comes down to it and you're in a jam, what documentation do you have in place? What processes, the handbook, whatever it may be? Or does the email supersede? Like, what would a judge say?
Yeah. Well, a judge is probably going to look at the email and the handbook and say which one was updated most recently. And 9 times out of 10, they're going to see the date on the email and they're going to see the date on the handbook, and the date on the email is probably going to be far more recent than the date on the handbook.
Yep.
So that right there is, I'm not a lawyer. So first of all, not a lawyer, not giving legal advice, blah, 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 blah. But if I were a betting man, I would say the judge is going to look at and say the most recent date is the one that supersedes anything else. And, as we're sitting here talking about this, the thing that pops in my head is at-will employment. And this is probably another subject we can talk about on a later date, but I think where this ties into it and where this is at, a risk point for a lot of business owners is they are still under the assumption that at-will employment means I can fire anyone for any reason at any time. And that is really not true. At-will employment exists now in a pseudo sense. I think you can still fire somebody for any reason, but there usually has documentation that goes with it. And if you don't have that documentation in now, it might not be as costly, but you might end up paying unemployment that you didn't have to pay, or there might be other fees that, again, based on what you put in an email or what's in your handbook, could put you at risk, because we are in a litigious society now, and if anyone has the means, they might take it out on you, especially if they believe they were wrongfully let go.
Even if they weren't, they can still raise a claim. So you're absolutely right, and I'm glad that you brought this up, because at-will employment is, it is technically accurate, that it is true. However, the day-to-day practice very different. This is why the documentation and kind of this proactive approach is so critical. There are thousands of claims raised every year just through the EEO alone. And what are the big ones? Discrimination, harassment. Whether it happened or not, they can still, as you rightly say, anybody can raise a claim for anything, and it must be investigated. It must be actioned on.
Mm-hmm. Well, and also think the number of people that, we're sitting here talking about email, but email or text. I know people that have been fired via text, and I can't remember if Kelly, if you brought this up, or
Yes,
Rich, if
it
you
was
brought
me.
this up, that is not good. Just don't do that. For starters.
Disastrous.
But
Yes.
I think the ease of electronic and the ability to avoid conflict has led some business owners to think, well, just send an email or just send a text. And that is the absolute worst possible way you could handle letting somebody go, because it usually doesn't end well, and it also gives another opportunity for that person to sue you.
Yeah, and there's no pulling text back.
No.
So this comes down to the age-old question of what's easy or what's right.
Yep. Kelly, what are some other issues that you see that either email or maybe even in the handbook side of things that really you see are problems that often need to be addressed? I love the AI one because that kind of raised my eyebrows a little bit, because I completely forgot about AI. I can understand where a business owner of 30 years would not even think of that, because AI has really been on the forefront maybe the last 2 years at best. It's been talked about, but really it's now become so integral in business, and all the software we use, all the apps we use have some component of AI in it anymore, whether it's true AI or not. So we're using it all the time, whether we realize it or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there is so much information that is just being put out there. But this really goes back to, even though, yes, AI is and technology is well integrated into our day-to-day lives, personally and professionally, there are some truths that just hold over time. And this is especially true with HR. Like, you've got to have those foundations in place, full stop. These, your basic policies, your processes, and think of like the major categories on, hiring, onboarding, performance, separation. These hold true regardless of what technology is happening. People are still people. And so you have to have these foundational pieces in place. And that's also a great place to start. When I'm talking with businesses and they're like, this is just so overwhelming, I kind of don't even want to deal with it. Like, this same owner, he said to me in the midst of the conversation, he was just like, oh my gosh, why did I start a business again? I don't want to, I just don't want to deal with this. So this was kind of right after that AI discussion. But these foundational things of, let me be proactive versus reactive, like, this is the common sense stuff that we all know. I'm not saying anything earth shattering here, but this is, again, like this tendency that we have of, as humans, of, what you need to do, especially like with HR, getting these pieces into place, these foundational protection pieces in place. So you know what you need to do, but we don't do it.
Right. And I think that's just, again, human nature kicks in. We tend to want to take the simplest route. Rich, have you got anything else that we've talked about here that you want to throw in?
No, the AI thing is just scary.
Yeah.
Because it's not just HR, but HR is a big one, right? When I look at design of an accounting system or design of processes for the financial side of the company, one of those legs or one of those pieces is human capital management, and it's entirely different than the rest of the processes that you put together for how does money come in, how does money go out. Like, then you've got the people part of it, which is a whole nother set of laws. It's a whole outside set of things, and now you throw AI in it, and you have to start thinking abstractly, which accountants are not used to. The financial part of it is not used to that. So you start thinking about, well, I'm just going to put it into Claude or ChatGPT, and when I do that, it's going to come back and it's going to give me this answer. Except you forget that Claude isn't yours. Claude is someone else's, and then Claude then has all that data. And when your competitor goes looking for it, like, gee, what is Rich doing today? Claude says, well, I'll tell you what Rich is doing today. He's doing X, Y, and Z. This is the new company policy. He just published it with us, and there's no restriction there. Mm-hmm. So you go back to 20 years ago when General Electric was one of those really, really big powerhouses that everybody looked to General Electric. General Electric had an IP policy that said if you mess with our logo, our name, or anything else, it was a like $5 million penalty. And employees signed this. The employees were the ones that it was put on them that they have to protect the logo and the IP at all times. Okay.
Yeah.
Don't mess with the GE logo. Like that was basically what it said. And now you look at it and you say, if GE was still the same powerhouse, how many people would mess that up, not even knowing it, because they would put everything out onto AI to get a faster answer.
Mm-hmm.
So as you get bigger, the complication gets bigger, the issues get bigger, and I can guarantee you that the small ones, the small companies that eventually will get bigger, are not being trained on any of that. Like there's no one there saying this is what you need to know, because as you get bigger and you founded this company and as you get larger, this is a policy you're going to need to have in there. Someone needs to advise that guy or that woman that this is what you need to know, and it's not there. The training part of it's missing. So I think HR is going to become a bigger and bigger issue because it's like I said, a whole nother set of laws that goes into everything that you're working on that now causes a whole lot more complication because of the protections for the employees and the protections for you against the employees. So
yeah, 100%. So, just two things, and the regulations are very slow in coming, but like two real examples I can give from clients that I've recently worked with. One is an owner definitely knows that his employee put their pricing and markup information into chat, trying to design the proposal or figure out the breakdown or whatever. So that markup is there. So can the competitor see it if they go looking? Yeah, they can. And another example, a real example is, hey, my employee told me they have anxiety. Is it real? What do I do? Can I fire them? Things like this. So now, I don't even want to get into it on this call, but now you're talking about HIPAA. So we've got to have, so until we have these regulations, these formal regulations come from wherever it is that they're going to come from, federal law, state law, companies have to regulate themselves. And how you do it is your internal policies of saying, this is what's allowed, this is what's not allowed. Is it hard to track? It is. But you have to set the expectations as owners, whether you're growing or not, you have to set the expectations of this is the boundary. Do this, don't do this.
Right.
And then you can respond if there's performance issues or a separation situation, you can respond to that.
Good points. I know we can go into a lot of different avenues with this. I see maybe a future discussion on AI a little bit deeper, social media also being another one, because as we get into this new technology, I think is creating greater HR issues that we have to address. But in the meantime, Kelly, is there any way that you have that you can kind of help people understand where they're at risk and what they should do about it?
Yeah, it's really just start at the beginning. Start with where you currently are. So I offer a HR snapshot. It's totally free, high level, and it's a place to start of, okay, let me see what major processes I have or don't have in place. And it's meant to be just kind of the first step of a longer journey, but it will help bring a little bit of focus of, oh my gosh, there's so much to do, I don't know where to begin. That'll bring a little bit of focus, and all you need to do is start, and then you can just build one and then move into the next and the next and the next. So like, again, the HR snapshot is free. It's on my website. It's on my LinkedIn profile. That is an excellent place for someone who's starting to really think about this to start, and then we can have further conversations from there if and when they want to.
Awesome. Kelly, what's the best way to get a hold of you if they want to try this snapshot out?
My website, leaninhr.com. There's
right.
a ton of resources there. The snapshot is right there in the menu. It's easy to find.
Excellent. Good. Kelly, thanks for coming on again. We will have you on next month and either talk about AI or social media or any other major HR issues that pop up. But I think we got enough topics here to cover us until at least the end of the year on this. So thanks again for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
All right, everyone. Rich, you take care. Stay warm.
Take care, Rich.
Absolutely. Take care.
All right.
Thanks for listening to Books and the Biz. If today's conversation sparked new ideas for your company, the team at XCXO can help you turn those ideas into action. XCXO brings together seasoned executives, fractional CEOs, COOs, CFOs, and CXOs who step into your business with the experience, strategy, and leadership to drive real results. Whether you're trying to scale, strengthen operations, improve profitability, or prepare for transition, our experts help you move faster and lead with confidence. To learn more or start a conversation, visit xcxo.net. That's xcxo.net, your shortcut to stronger leadership and a better run business. Thanks again for joining us.